I'm like maybe a half an inch, like 5 and
I
1
would
half
like to say
inch.
5, 2 and a half, but it's probably
Yeah.
just
Every
aspirational.
half inch matters.
My mom was 4.
What's going on, man?
Oh.
Later in life,
Our
she was
class reunion.
4, 8.
Yeah, my grandmother.
I told you I was going to. Ashley's texting me the whole time, harassing me.
Okay.
I'm at work like a normal human.
I would like to call this Tuesday, July 21st, 2026, Traverse City Commission, Planning Commission special meeting to order. Sorry, I just clambered my way through that. It's been too many weeks since we've been here. I'm going to give the land acknowledgement, and then we'll do roll call. The land on which we gather is the territory of the Ottawa and Chippewa peoples who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. Thank you for your strength and resilience in protecting this land and inspiring us to uphold our responsibilities to do the same. Roll call, please.
Commissioner McGillivray,
Here.
Commissioner O'Brien,
Present.
Commissioner Treadwell,
Here.
sorry, Commissioner Swanson,
Here.
Commissioner Cameron,
Present.
Commissioner Reardon,
Here.
Commissioner Holtree,
Here.
Commissioner Anderson,
Here.
Commissioner Deturi,
Here.
and Commissioner Hershey is absent and is inexcused. And I'm sorry, Mitch, I forgot your name tag. I think it's from the BZA. I'll go get it.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to announcements.
I do want to announce or just introduce everybody to our planning intern for the summer. This is Evan McGee. He is a graduate of Grand Valley State, and he is going on to graduate school at Wayne State. And he's been helping us slog through lots of zoning amendments and things this summer, so we really appreciate his help.
Thank you. Welcome. Moving on to topics for consideration if we don't have any other announcements. So item A is the introduction of a rezoning application for 314 East 8th Street from C2 to R3.
Yes, so this is, again, introduction of a rezoning request that we just very recently received, but we know that there's a time constraint here. So we put this on your agenda. We've already set the public hearing for August 5th and have sent out the notices, so hopefully that works for everybody. This is property owned by the land bank, the Grand Traverse County Land Bank. They're assembling this along with other properties as part of a redevelopment project for a low mod income housing development with 40 odd units in it, believe it or not, that will be on this location. This is the only property, and this is located on 8th Street where Copy Central is right now. And if you look at the maps, this is the only property in this part of 8th Street on the south side that is zoned anything other than R3. So it kind of is a little island by itself, currently zoned C2, I assume to accommodate the that pre-existing use of Copy Central. We did look at the older zoning maps to try to ferret out exactly what happened. It looked like it used to be zoned industrial. So again, I think this was just kind of a bridge of concessions that was made at some point to allow certain uses during transition. So this is part of that, and the R3 designation will give relief to this project for certain restrictions in the C2 district that just doesn't make a lot of sense for this. And rather than seek a lot of variances, it made more sense to seek rezoning. And the remainder of that property will be zoned R3 as well. So if there's other questions, I think Maxwell Cameron is probably willing to speak to this. He's representing the land bank in the county in this application. And other than that, I would just ask that you set that public hearing, and if there's other additional information you'd like in a follow-up report to the planning commission, just let me know and we'll add that in.
Thank you, Leslie. Any questions, comments, concerns from the group? I think it made a lot of sense to me. It clearly read as like we're trying to accommodate something so that it doesn't become non-conforming. It's like that one little spot. Yeah, makes a lot of sense to me. Jackie?
I was interested in examining some of the differences between the C2 and the R3 requirements, and wondered if you could help me understand in terms of height and setbacks and use by right, particularly short-term rentals and drinking and marijuana establishments and provisioning centers, the differences between the two.
I'd have to go one by one through everything to confirm those specific uses, but I know that as a rule, these projects would be limited if there's any pilot or any other financial assistance associated with this, then generally there's no ability to have short-term rentals. And I'd have to go back and look again, but if memory serves, I don't think short-term rentals are allowed in the R3 district. So that would be eliminated under this, this proposal for rezoning. As far as building height, the maximum it does go up from 30 feet to 45 feet, although for non-residential uses in the current district, it can be also 45 feet. So I don't know if that was part of the consideration here, was the height difference, which I would consider to be the biggest detriment to fully using this property in an R3, under R3 zoning for their purposes. So again, I'm getting a nod from Maxwell, so I assume that that's part of their thinking. And again, I can, if there's particular uses you want us to highlight in an updated report, we can update those. Otherwise, you'd have to wait while I look those up because I don't know them off the top of
Anytime
my head.
before the public hearing would be lovely.
Okay.
Thank you.
So it's
They're not
medical
in this chart.
Yeah, they're
Okay.
not, I was doing a quick control find, and vacation rentals aren't listed, and marijuana dispensaries aren't listed under
Okay.
R3, so.
A tourist home is listed.
Yeah,
But
So,
that's
yes,
different.
short-term rentals aren't allowed in anything zoned residential. So
Correct.
R1, R2, R3, no short-term rentals. You could have tourist homes, which then can only be in homes, so those wouldn't be allowed in, what was it, C? Two. But short-term rentals maybe can be, I don't
Yeah,
know.
Yeah,
I
they can be.
assume
They're
in
by right.
C2.
but with the pilot, that's something that the pilot would restrict, right?
Right.
Right, Max?
Yeah, potentially, and how this is going to work for the county is we're holding and assembling this property and some adjacent property, doing some site preparation, and then handing it over to the Housing Commission for the development of a housing project on this land. At some later date, they would pursue potentially a pilot application through the city, and that would be, part of the restrictions associated with getting that approval.
They're also restricted by MISTA, right?
Through their,
Mitch may know.
Yes. Well, first off, in the interest of disclosure and in keeping with our ethics policy, I am the vice chair of the Housing Commission, but I have no financial stake in this project. Yes, this is, as Maxwell said, the first step of assembling the properties and getting the development conditions right on the ground. But then there will be applications, both for a pilot, either 4% or 9%, and a low-income tax credit application through MISTA. We don't know what the exact form of that will be, but generally those are for, say, a 30-year time frame. And, well, we can say that, yes, after that 30 years expires, it could get sold or changed to some other use or rental agreement. One, we haven't seen conversion of LIHTC or pilots in this area. Even after they originally expire, they tend to get renewed. And two, we don't know what the real estate market, what the housing landscape will be, what the commercial landscape will be 30 years down the road, and it could be something very different than we have right now. So at least for the next 30 years, there will be no major commercial use, no pot shops, no short-term rentals, no properties that are out of character for the neighborhood.
But they wouldn't be allowed if,
Correct.
if we changed our to R3.
Yeah, it's
anyway,
moot
so.
if we
Yeah.
allow for the,
So.
yeah. Jackie?
And then another portion of my question had to do with setbacks and the differences in setbacks between those two zonings.
Yeah, those are, again, are in the table.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah, I'm
like,
having trouble reading some of the materials these days, so maybe you could summarize for me.
yeah, so the side set, let's go down the list. Front setback in C2 is lesser of 8 feet, max of 25. Front setback for R3 is within 4 feet of the average setback, but not less than 19 feet. It's like really, there's a lot more words crammed in there, but
Yeah,
because it like talks about the point.
Highlights are fine.
Okay, great. Sides are in C2, 10 feet. R3, 14 feet aggregate. So can be 6 feet on a single side.
So, just a correction.
Yeah.
It's only 10 feet if abutting a residential district. Otherwise, it's none.
Oh, you're
For
right. I
C2.
missed the none. You're
C2.
right. For the C2, correct. Thank you, Brian.
And another point of clarification, yes, setbacks exist, but they are based on the current property lines that, depending on what will happen in the future, the site plan may involve shifting of property lines themselves. For example, McGuff's is adjacent to the land bank property, but their building physically overhangs the property line by a number of feet. On the other side, you have Riverine Condominiums that has their parking lot and some green space with a section connecting of the Boardman Lake Loop Trail between that and the coffee shop parcel. But they have expressed a willingness, especially if there is going to be shared driveway access, to have some flexibility in where that property line is, and if it needs to be moved over 5 feet to accommodate a setback or something, that could also be done.
But generally speaking, this is kind of considered a downzoning, going from commercial to residential. And even though all the setbacks are hard to compartmentalize or generalize, in my mind, they're a little bit more restrictive under the R3 because the rear setback is 25.
Correct.
And it's 5 feet in the existing C2.
Well, thank you.
Anything else from this group for right now? Yeah, Maxwell.
Just wanted to make one more comment and to share our appreciation for the project in total. There are 2 parcels that are next to this parcel that we're talking about today that are owned by Traverse City, and as part of bringing housing to our community, we've been working with Traverse City to bring those parcels into this project, combine with this parcel and our property that we own behind McGough. So it truly takes, it's a team effort to make something like this come to fruition. So just wanted to share our thanks It's great to be working with the city on this.
Thank you. Anything else before we go to the public comment portion on this item? Okay. Seeing nothing, I'll go to public comment on this item. And seeing none, I will come back to the body. I think Leslie said it is already scheduled for the public hearing, so I think we're just acknowledging that we'll see it again in a couple weeks at our regularly scheduled meeting on the first Tuesday of August.
It's actually a Wednesday.
Oh, it's a Wednesday
election day.
because of the primary. Good call. I looked at my calendar and I was like, there's no way this meeting's on
I
a
only
Wednesday.
know that because I looked and I have to send that to my wife.
Okay. So I guess we'll see it then, and we will be excited. So moving on to item B, EV parking standards. Is this you, Leslie, or is this Evan?
Well, I offered this up to Evan, but he's gonna observe this meeting, but you'll be hearing from him
Perfect.
later in the summer, I think. So I think you've all heard me talk a little bit about Energy Navigators. We had a grant of some technical assistance from this organization, and they helped us identify what we should be focusing on in regards to ordinance amendments to promote EV readiness in private parking lots. So this attempts to kind of speak to that, and I'm going to apologize in advance for all the acronyms, but the basic comment or the basic context is that there are three types of EV readiness. One is, and I might ask Evan to make sure I get this terminology right, but one is the capacity, which means that you have enough electricity and enough power present at the site for a certain capacity. Another level is the readiness, EV readiness, and how many sites or parking spots you have that have all the conduit and everything set up and ready to go in anticipation of having the hardware there. And full capacity is having the hardware and having actual EV sites, so or EV charging stations available. And there are some states where, notably California, where the standards are very high, and they can be as much as 50% of a parking lot that's required to be EV operational or EV ready. The recommendations that we're giving you as a starting point are a little closer to what we see in Ann Arbor and other examples in Michigan. And there's a lot of latitude here about whether we want to focus on EV readiness, the capacity, or the actual number of charging stations available now. There are a lot of things that are changing quickly, so it's hard to kind of anticipate what the best course of action is. And we certainly don't want to get ahead of the technology or the capacity, especially if the charging stations and the hardware and the software that goes with it continues to evolve and get better over time, which we are already seeing right now. So, I think we certainly will have a discussion, further discussions with TC Light and Power. They have a lot of expertise in this area as well, and they, along with our parking system, our director, Nicole Van Ness, she's very up to date on all of that equipment as well, because they all operate and purchase this equipment. They've all had their frustrations with certain equipment, but they, I think, have a good feel for what their demand is in where they're providing EV right now. So I guess I'd ask that you not necessarily focus on those ratios, but we're just kind of looking for a little direction here to see if we're on the right track and if there's a flavor that makes most sense to all of you, so that we can hone in a little bit. And then I'll say one more thing and then hear from all of you. And that is that as part of this, there are just some easy, low-hanging fruit that we should include in the zoning ordinance, including, of course, any related definitions of any terminology that we use, to allow that for any parking lots where there's a minimum number of parking spaces already required, that EV spaces count toward that minimum, and that if somebody wants to do EV charging over and above that, it's an allowed accessory use, and also that in anticipation that there may just be charging station areas that function almost like a gas station, that we acknowledge that kind of use and allow that as well as a use by right in certain areas. So that's their general recommendation, and then to kind of pick a lane with the EV readiness spectrum.
Any comments right off the bat from the group? Brian?
Okay. I like the first, number one, to permit EV charging as allowable accessory use to parking lots in all zoning districts by right. Seems to make sense. I don't know if it's necessary since we haven't allowed them, but they still go up now. But, I mean, if you want to put it in writing, technically, yeah, we probably should allow them. I think an EV parking space should count towards minimum parking requirements. And I have no idea what EVSE accessibility standards are in line with U.S. Access Boards or state-level accessibility standards. Not sure what that means or requires in practice, so I want more information on it. Sounds good in theory, but I don't know. For all I know, they're always done that way. For all I know, there's issues where, it could be a major regrading of land or something to put one in. I don't know. I don't think but I just want more information on that. I have issues with amending the chart of minimum parking requirements to require a minimum percentage of EV-capable, EV-ready, and EV-installed spaces. And I'll give you one example. I know you said don't focus on the ratios. I would want to hear from Light and Power about that. There's a lot changing in that field right now. The popularity of EV-only electric-only vehicles is dropping like a rock. It's more into hybrids right now. I talked to somebody today who drives an all-electric vehicle. They said they pulled up and thought while they're at a meeting, they would charge their car at Light and Power, and the cost is about $6 an hour, where he can charge it at home for 50 cents. So it's like, no, we backed out of that space and put it in a regular space. So there's a question I have about, now, that being said, for locals, they're mostly going to charge at home. But we get a lot of tourists, and people can drive electric vehicles up here. So there is probably a need. But then again, I don't know how those numbers are going to change. And we are supposed to be planning for the future. This is a tough one, but here's a question I have. Residential, 100% EV capable. Okay? EV capable is a location or parking space that has the infrastructure necessary to support the future installation of EV charging equipment. In an EV-capable location, components are designed or upgraded to accommodate EV charging stations in the future. Okay? I have no idea what that means. Okay, what does infrastructure mean? Running conduit? Does it mean if I build a house, I have to, or if I I'm going to remodel my house this year, Do I have to upgrade my, is my remodeling by adding a bedroom and a new garage, do I have to have it EV ready? Do I have to upgrade my, my electric panel to 200 amp service? Is that going to be a requirement now? And if I have to do that, so that's an extra, okay, honestly, I'm going to do it anyways, but that's an extra cost that you're now adding in. And what does it mean for me to do that? And is it a housing cost? I don't know what it means. I don't know what that means, and it's not defined. I think you really need to have, how is someone going to interpret that? Because it's not very clear to me on what that actually means. My question would be, you're going to put in affordable housing. Do you want, what's that going to mean for your affordable housing project if you have to make all the spaces, all the parking spaces, EV capable? Does that have an impact from a design standard? Does that have an impact for you on how you lay it out? Because you now have to have space for each one of these charging stations to go in. And how do you address that? And what's your impact on that? I don't know. I doubt you have an answer for that today, but it might be something you might want to think about and weigh in on going forward. Because we're just saying all residential. And so I don't know. I have a lot of questions about this. I think somewhere, if you're ready for a public hearing in August, is that what you said? No, I'm not ready for a public hearing on this. I would like to see it come back. But I have, like I said, I have questions. I like the definitions, except for that first one, EV capable, is just not very clear as a, EV ready is a step above. And I don't know how those two play off each other. So that's what I need and see in the definition. And then I'm just, not sure okay, not sure why we're trying to require post offices or governmental offices, since we have no regulation over post offices whatsoever, so please strike post offices. The only governmental offices we have any control over, for the most part, are city governmental control offices, which may or may not be exempt, but, so, anyways, yeah. That's it. That's all I got for you.
Jerry, I think you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I don't know if this could be, I just always find it, sometimes like we as the government should show that we put EV charging at our locations. Brian's point, like nothing better than us telling people we have to do stuff, but we don't have it ourselves. I don't know if that's something that would be in this ordinance. And maybe that's a city commission thing, but my general public comment on it is we talk a lot about EVs, buying EVs for fleet, but I don't really see us having any at any of our locations. Now this building, we don't have one out here, but we don't necessarily own the building.
Actually, the city owns 50% of the building.
County owns the
25.
other 50.
What?
I thought it was 25.
No, you
Yeah.
own 50%, but you only use 25.
But either way, that would just, I don't know where that fits in. I know government was listed here. Just sometimes I don't know how we fit that in, but it would just be nice to, the city and working with Light and Power, can we get a couple at our locations to show that we're putting our, best foot forward and not just requiring it for everyone else. But again, that might not be our role.
As an EV owner and driver, this is interesting to me. I hear you, Brian. And I also hear that we are trying to plan for a future that up until last year was pretty certain we were moving in a particular direction. So I understand that politically, things will always change. Presidents will change, vibes will change, policies will change. But if we want to try, in my opinion, to survive on this planet, I think it's going to be, at the very minimum, incrementally moving in that direction. So, and especially as a city body that has a goal to be sustainable, at least in parts, I think we have to commit to at least looking into it. I agree that definitions, again, I think are kind of circuitous in that, like, you can come up with one, but then they're going to be ever changing. So how do you land on the proper definition of EV capable? I do hear that. And I think it's probably pretty basic. At least in terms of my experience, it's not fun. The range anxiety is real. And if we could at least do our part to commit to being an area in the north that has a substantial amount of charging stations, I would love to see that. Southeast Michigan is soaring, above and beyond. They have a lot. Southwest Michigan, no. It is very sparse. They have some. You have to find them. And they are often at gas stations now, where they've like installed 2 chargers at a gas station, which makes the most sense to me. I don't know why more people aren't doing that. And sometimes governmental centers. Kalamazoo has one, where they have like 2 or 3 chargers of varying output. So it's really hard as a driver to then try to predict where you can charge. So I think this, like a situation like this, where you're requiring it in certain areas, could be helpful for that. Just in terms of like my experience of what it's like to be an EV owner and driver. $6 is absurd. So I would not pay that for that hour. However, I have had to pay substantial amounts, again, when you're in an area where there is only 1 or 2 chargers and you're just desperate because the next couple hundred you don't have anything on the radar. So but again, that goes back to there are no regulations on the pricing. So it can vary substantially. And it's left entirely up to the property owners, which feels like really scary. But I do think that building it into requirements makes sense. I agree that, I think I already said this, but an EV capable definition could be a little bit, more fleshed out definition would be a little bit more helpful. But I don't see why those could not be, especially on like new builds, why that couldn't be required of that property. Do I have anything else to say while I'm still rambling about it? All of these places seem like areas that would be used and would be nice areas to then be able to rely upon for a charging station. A hospital, schools. What else did I think was really good? Governmental offices, just because I've known to look for those for that. I think that's all I'm going to say about that. But it is, like, theaters make a lot of sense to me. And again, I think we can probably be strategic about what kinds of areas we're going to see new builds in. Like in the industrial, there's probably not going to be a ton of changeover. So maybe we do require that if and when we, in 20 years, somebody builds something new in the industrial district. Yeah, I think they should have a requirement there. Those are just a couple of my thoughts as an EV owner and driver. Mitch?
Yes, I get that this is something that was in a number of plans that our city has developed. But as other people have been unhappy with this aspect of our strategic plan or that aspect of our master plan, this is something that I wasn't happy about. Yes, we should be working towards better electrification and a more climate-friendly transportation network, which, considering we do have a lot of people visiting this area and people that commute in and out every day, at present does mean that we need to accommodate electric vehicles. But where and how that accommodation happens is one thing. Yes, we could have a charging station at every residential facility over 20 units. But that doesn't necessarily serve a purpose, and it's not like that if nobody in that residential complex owns an electric vehicle, and it's not like somebody that lives somewhere else is going to park at that apartment building just to use the charger. I can see us trying to encourage it, but that would be partnering with Light and Power and, say, the county or NMC to see, do we have enough potential locations that already have some infrastructure that it's just a matter of putting the outlet right in where people can use it. And there have been ebbs and flows of the EV market, what consumer demand is, what vehicles are capable of in terms of how fast they can charge, how long they can go on a single charge. I don't think that the market has fully stabilized in that regard, and we don't know what is going to happen with overall trends of Uber or other rideshare companies and their impact on, say, how tourists that are staying in this area are getting around the area. And yes, cars are more carbon friendly than if they're EVs, but you know what's even more carbon friendly? A bus, or bikes, or people walking. And if we can, say, find ways to put more bus stops around town and increase access to public transit, that could have a greater net positive good in terms of reducing the carbon impacts of our transportation system.
Jackie?
I would be very interested in seeing this come back for more in-depth conversation and discussion, and there are a couple of things I'd like to hear more about when that happens. One is some background information on the Energy Navigators. I'd like to know about their organization and their funding sources and you know, how they're structured, and just understand their engagement with municipalities. I'm also sensitive to the fact that I think of public parking as a public good that we provide for our community, and that in this community, the scope and scale of public parking is something that's shrinking. And you know, we have certain existing protected classes of parking, like ADA or, you know, other sorts. And when I think about this proposal, it almost feels like we're creating another protected class of parking. And I'd just like to be sure that we are thinking about this not only from our fiduciary responsibility, but also from an equity standpoint, that all of the stakeholders in the community are being represented and considered as we look at how to allocate this increasingly rare resource. That's it.
Brian?
Question for when this comes back. How much of a upgrade or remodel or addition, whatever, would kick these requirements in? When does it kick in on a project? Just an observation. Obviously, this isn't going to do anything for the downtown. because we have no parking requirements in the downtown. So, 2. Re, Anna, where do you charge yours? And do you feel that there's a shortage of available charging stations in the city?
Yes.
And I say city, just the city. We don't have any control over the townships.
Yeah. As everybody knows, I live very nearby.
Yes.
And I have a parking pass for the structure because my building only has 10 parking spaces.
Right.
So I walk across the street and I park in the structure. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 electric vehicle charging stations in the parking structure. One is like temporarily / permanently broken. It hasn't been usable. I have accidentally plugged into it for hours, hoping I get a charge, and I do not. So effectively, we have 6 spaces. In these summer months, they are full. I can find, if it's after 5 p.m. on a weekday, I can go grab one. If it is any time during the weekend, if it is after like 8 or 9 p.m., I can usually find one. But any time during the day and evening, early afternoon, those are pretty much taken. But again, they're in, because of where I live in proximity to my option, it's the public parking structure, so people often go there. I would imagine people are going there knowing that there might be charging stations there. I believe the other parking structure has them as well. They have now upped the price of parking if you want access to both structures. So I do not pay the added $10 so that I can have access to both structures. So then, if I can't find a space, it just means that we are then opting for, we're biking, we're walking, we're just going to make it last until we can get a space in the structure to charge. Usually it's only like a day wait. I've not had to wait 2 days, thankfully.
Do you go any place else to charge?
No. Only on trips. But that's because of there are no superchargers in the area that could work for my vehicle. There are no like fast charging stations in this area for my vehicle. There are at Tesla's.
So
Those
they're different. It's different.
Correct. Those only take like 1 hour to get you a percentage up. These units are specifically for like longer term, slower charging. These chargers will take me like 16 hours for a charge.
Wow.
100%.
For 80%. I have a limiter on.
Okay.
But for 80, from like, 15% to 80%, it's 12 to 14 hours. 100% would probably be like 16 hours. So again, those
Don't
are,
they make fast chargers for your car?
they do. We just don't have any in this area. The closest is Kalkaska.
Somebody just told me that Light and Power is ripping out the old ones and putting in new fast chargers.
Which makes sense, especially if this region doesn't have any. It would be a good market. I mean, we have Rivians over by the mall. I haven't checked those yet. Those are usually like somewhere in between. They're not claiming to be fast chargers, usually.
But then the other ones are at the library.
Mm-hmm. Those are probably comparable to what I charge on. There are some at the marina. Those are comparable to what I charge on. They're slow.
Up over by the Chamber of Commerce building.
Mm-hmm. Again, the slower ones. There's like, they're labeled by like level 1s, level 2s, and DC fast charger is what it's called. I have a Chevy Bolt for anyone that's interested. Tesla works very differently. But yeah, it's odd. It's great that I don't have to wait more than a couple days, but they're like, for example, there was a day that I couldn't get in and I hoofed it to the airport because I had to go over to Costco anyway, and I just sat there for an extra hour just to get a little bit back down to where I live.
It's interesting.
It is
So
interesting.
clearly there's a need, at least in the summer.
There is a need, at least in the summer. Again, like how much of that need do we want to try to prescribe versus just kind of let shake out? I get that,
Yeah.
with anything.
One of my, so, and I understand what you said earlier about the whole politics question or issue. But what I'm seeing right now are more market-driven fast. So, basically, low resale, but quick depreciation on electric vehicles, battery costs, and the high cost of electric vehicles. It's really the last one, the high cost electric vehicles, or a lot of them is what's driving, is what slowed the market down. Could be a temporary, people could start moving back, it's only been a year, but, and I don't know I don't have a hybrid, I don't have an electric vehicle, I know nothing about them. Although when I've ridden on them, they're very quiet. And sometimes when they drive by you, they sound like sci-fi vehicles.
Yeah. The sound is artificial so that you can hear us coming, because if it wasn't there, you would not hear us coming.
That's very interesting.
I drove a Prius in 2010, and I had to make sure people saw me at intersections before I proceeded to go, because they couldn't hear you.
Does a Prius require a charge?
That's a hybrid.
I know, do hybrids require charge?
Not the Prius that
Some
I
may,
drove.
some may
It
not,
was-
but I didn't think they did.
Depending on how much you're kicking into that EV source, most of the time I think it's using the gas source, and I think you can turn it on and off.
I think it recharges when the
Correct.
gas motor's running.
Hmm.
when it breaks.
But there are hybrids often charging. There are people that work down here that I can see their cars charging in there all the time. So I know it's the same couple people with the exception of these summer months where I see new vehicles plugging in. But we're all fighting for the same 6 spaces because one is designated permanently for the parking services vehicle.
So I have a
Shay.
question.
Yeah.
Does it make more sense to, and I don't know, just spitballing here, does it make more sense to require that they be fast chargers so that there's more turnover?
They're a lot more expensive.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I understand that, but
Yeah,
I mean, listening to Anna's experience,
Right.
it's like,
But
maybe it's not a matter of supply, it's just the turnover isn't
yeah,
happening as
there's
quickly
a lot of
it needs to.
optimization involved in this so that you get the right mix. And that was, part of what I was kind of hoping to find out more about through Energy Navigators and other research that we've been doing, what the right mix is. To me, I thought, why aren't they all fast chargers?
Yeah.
But there's actually a lot of situations where both for the user and, for the amount of electricity used and the much higher cost for the chargers itself, it makes a lot of sense to use the level 1s and level 2s. I think mostly level 2 is like the sweet
Agreed.
spot.
Okay.
From what I understand.
I mean, it makes sense from a downtown perspective to have somebody hanging out downtown for 16 hours, right? They're forced to hang out here.
So that was another example that I forgot I was going to bring up is like, it is really helpful to have them in areas where people have entertainment because if I go to one more area where I am at an old abandoned outlet mall with a single thrift store, I don't know what I'll do with myself because you can only spend so much time and you have to charge for at least 1 hour most of the time. So some of those places that we were listing, like a hospital, people are likely going to be in there a while.
Yeah. Can I add one more thing to institutions? Can we include, this is my dream, train depots? Just for like the possible future, right, Brian? The possible future.
It's always possible.
We can get rid of post offices, I'm okay with that, I get that, but like train depots?
Jackie?
When this comes back, could we make a point of asking for not only Nicole Van Ness, but a representative of Light and Power to be here and present to us so we can hear their perspectives on this firsthand?
I'll do what I can.
I think I would be satisfied with a memo, but again, like, if we can't get them here, I think a memo would be.
Interaction
Yeah.
would be lovely.
I have another question.
Yeah, Brian, sorry.
So no other commercial place we're asking to put them. These are, so we have residential care and treatment facilities. We're requiring them. These are really all residential, specialized housing. Okay, then we're requiring them at high schools and colleges, all other schools, places of worship, hospitals, government offices, and auditoriums. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't go down the next page. Office, financial institutions, and retail. I mean, you have to ask, I know this is an easy way to do it. But given that you have to charge for at least an hour, I would have to basically, you're really only looking at putting these in places for employees, for a lot of these places. Like you said, if you go, you can only go, if you're, I don't know, I know I tried not to go into any store for an hour if it's possible. I do know other people that are close to me who have no problem spending an hour in a store. So, I don't know, maybe that works, but, it's just, that's kind of where I'm asking this is, who are we really putting these in for? And can we address issues like a shopping center where you have a mix of restaurants, and what do we do for that? You know, if you take any of our existing shopping centers, well, we don't have a lot of them, but, you know, so I'm pretty sure people can spend an hour in Costco. So that would make sense, but what is Costco? I don't know. But you go to some other places like Tom's East Bay, it's got all sorts of stores, none of which you're going to spend an hour in any single one, but there are multiple uses there. So but they're all different uses. You have everything from medical offices there, well, actually physical therapy, gyms. How do you sort of make something there that works for addressing all these multiple different uses, because we're not always individual pieces of property when we're looking at this. So shared parking areas, that sort of thing. Anyways.
So just a couple of quick notes. One is that this table is the table that's in the zoning ordinance right now. So that's why these categories are what they are.
You mean that-
Certainly, we can add new categories or expand these, you know,
Pull them apart.
categories a little bit more to address some of the uses that may not already be addressed. And so that might become a bigger, you know, can of worms than we originally anticipated. There's still a notion that we're going to update the entire zoning ordinance. So, but I understand that for our purposes right now, maybe we just need a separate table and not incorporate it into the parking standards table. So I think maybe we can separate them for that reason, and then with the intention of putting them back together again later, because I don't want to start to get into new categories and new standards. And then secondly, like I said, I've been slowly learning a lot more about EV charging. Also, I don't have an EV, this is redundant, but EV vehicle. So I don't know a lot about it, but again, I always thought, yeah, you're going to be there a long time or you want a fast charger, but apparently there is a lot of value in topping off for just even 15 minutes. And so I think we can't think strictly about the 1 hour or multiple hours of charging. There is a usage pattern that is like small bits of time just to top off.
Oh, okay, so then
So-
everything I said doesn't matter.
It does.
No, it's
It's
fine.
just that it's all in context and, again, clearly, we all need lots more information. I just wanted to start to introduce this to you. I have a lot more to share, and we can hone in on this. We had a lot of things on this agenda, so didn't have a lot of time, but wanted to get this in front of you and get a little more direction, so.
Yeah, there's a lot of use cases. Jerry?
Yeah, one thing I was thinking, the more we talk about it, the less I understand it. So like who pay, like if we put it at the high school, does the high school pay for it? But then who gets the money?
The
Does-
person that installs collects.
Okay, so like whoever's the manufacturer of the charger gets the $6 an hour.
The one that paid to put it in. They will collect. So the high school would, for example, if they
Does-
put it in.
The high school have to pay the energy cost that they took, so it's like a reimbursement, but they can set the price.
Yes.
Okay.
It is, again, it is kind of like the Wild
Yeah.
Wild West. They are incredibly expensive to put in, especially the fast chargers. We did some research on when we were most recently stranded at a Meyer, so we were wondering why there were not as many in the state. They pay the install, and then they kind of gamble on how frequented the charger will be, like how many people are they going to be seeing. Then they gamble that with how much they're going to charge, because then if they do charge too much, they probably won't see as much people. And whether or not they have like the funds that they need immediate recouping, or if they can just kind of like wait it out. It's wild out there.
So there is the ability to contract with other companies to do it. Yeah. So you would, like the high school, do they want to manage the bookkeeping of that? I talked to a business owner today, and he said same thing. He was looking at the issue, and it's like, he could put it in, which seemed to make the most financial sense, or he could pay someone to come put it in, and that person would charge. But if he puts it in, then he's got to manage it. And it's like, am I qualified to manage these things? What do I know about
Yeah.
them? I'm going to have to hire someone to maintain it.
And there's multiple different systems and providers now, so they would decide which one they like, whether or not those ever have fail, or are they really reliable?
So it's an interesting question.
Yeah.
Since I'm kind of still new, our charge is just to put it in the zoning. It's not who's paying and how it's installed and is the city buying it. Yeah, but I just wanted to double check that we're just making room in the zoning to reflect a future with EV.
Yeah,
stuff.
to
Okay.
decide where and when we would put that requirement into
Okay.
our zoning code.
But if we have broader recommendations that say, we think that these zoning requirements make sense, but there's other things that are outside of planning and zoning that would fit in, then those could also be advanced to the city commission as part of the memos.
Correct. Jerry?
So, for example, like for the EV capable, or let me see, capable, like, so if someone's building a new development, they would potentially like install conduit in the parking lot, so in the future, they don't have to rip up the concrete.
That's EV ready. EV ready is the conduit. EV capable just
Means
has,
there's electricity nearby.
that they have the electrical capacity.
Okay.
And, to me, it seems crazy if you're going to put pavement down and you've got the capacity and you have some notion that at some point the readiness part will kick in, or you're going to want to provide that, not to make it EV ready. So I guess, the cost differential there is kind of interesting maybe to find out more about. But, yeah, the capable is just to have the electricity ready to go for future when you would have the conduit there. So that's the lowest category.
Which to me kind of makes sense if we're gonna.
Mitch?
Yes. Okay, I appreciate that this lists most of the zoning categories that we already have, but one thing that we've recently created that I think would make sense would be auto-centric uses. And yes, if you're putting in a gas station, it has historically been to dispense diesel or regular, but it seems reasonable that we can say, hey, you're going to have places that people can pull up. You're going to have electricity going to those places. Why not have at least one or two chargers as well?
I think a separate
Same with a
table.
car wash. If you're going to be pulling up and vacuuming out your car, that would be a perfect location for a fast charger.
A separate table makes sense. Yeah, go Jerry.
Okay, so do we know if, just a data point, do we know, I know you can like plug in at your house, but then you can also upgrade your power to have a better, does that pull a building permit, and would we have any idea of like how many residents are doing that? I think Light and Power has to like, you have to have an electrician like.
Yeah, well, for instance, I just put in, at my house, just, put in a new meter and put capacity in, but that was for other reasons, not for fast charger, or charging. Although we considered doing that, but then we would have had to like double what we were doing. And we don't have an EV right now, but we thought that'd be silly not to provide that either for us or a future owner, but we didn't. But, so I think just from that, my guess is it would be hard to figure out why someone was upgrading.
Most of the time, it is the ones that they install at home they're never fast charging. They're always like a 1 or a 2, mostly 1s, because 1s I think are the same amount of voltage as like, to power a fridge. So they're not like out of control, and I think that they are easily installable into like a garage. And when I bought my vehicle, Chevy offers a discount, like a credit toward having a company come install it for you. Brian?
It'd be nice to know how much these costs. I mean, to give us a rough number on an average price, because, we say we're gonna start requiring 10%, so, if that's 10 spaces or 1 space, it's a cost, so we're adding a cost on development of, or remodeling properties. So it's a cost to the owner, and every cost gets spread around, every increase. Especially if it's not, if they don't, I don't know if they pay for themselves. I assume they do, but I haven't heard about anybody, raking in millions on these things, so I'd be interested to know, like what's Light and Power's experience on these? They paid for themselves, What's the maintenance schedule on these? You start requiring people to put one of these things in, and then the cost is not a quick cost, it's gonna be a long-term cost. And I don't know if it ever pays itself back. And I think we always have to, it's not in and of itself a reason to say no to this, but you've gotta be aware of it and know what kind of additional costs you're putting on something. Because that can kill all sorts of projects. We'll never see them because we didn't know. And I would also like to know sort of what's the process going to be? I'm assuming this would be addressed in site plan reviews. And then the question becomes, when you start talking about electrical panels, Is our zoning administrator qualified to determine whether or not the electrical components, or is it just gonna be the charging port or charging station will go here? Or do they have to see the whole electrical plan? Something that normally goes to building department. Not saying it can't be done, but I don't know if staff is qualified to review those. And I don't know the level of review. See, I just got lots of questions. So it's not just what we do, it's how it's gonna be administered is one of my big questions.
In terms of cost, I think it makes sense to have it broken down by cost of EV capable, cost of EV ready, cost of EV installed, just so that it's clear that because that's really what we're thinking about putting in as our different levels. Because if the EV capable cost is just like $100, that would make sense to have that kind of clarity. Versus the fully EV installed. Does that make sense?
I'm waiting for the housing commission to tell us that, because they're gonna go back and talk about this, or thinking about doing this, how it would impact our project, and then they can go back and tell us.
Well, it's not just what it does on the cost side, but then,
Design side too.
yes, and say, what does our parking lot configuration then have to be? How many parking spaces do we actually have? Especially if it's, say, Riverview Terrace, where you have 43 parking spaces for 115 tenants, and that is supposed to accommodate all the residents, all the staff, and delivery vehicles. So, yes, that can work, but if you then had specific spots set aside for certain vehicles, it could complicate things.
I know that in past, a lot of times when people have come for, when they're seeking financial assistance for housing from the state or whatever, there's often people tell us that they have to have at least one parking space per unit.
And yeah, that's the other factor. We can have our site plan, but it's also what MISTA is willing to finance and what Federal Home Loan Bank of Indianapolis or other partners are willing to. And hey, for some of them, if they are somehow eligible for more credits, they might actually be more willing to support a development that has electric vehicles. But that is not something that we can necessarily predict from the start.
I understand.
Anything else from this group, Maxwell?
I think that this is a really interesting discussion. I've had some experience in a previous job with EV chargers, and you're asking the right questions. I think that additional discussion on EV capability and how that intersects with EV capacity from your utility providers is an important discussion. But also, when looking at these categories, and we've talked a little bit about use case, right? So depending upon what sort of business, the use case might be different. And that's going to inform what is EV capable, level 1 versus a level 3. And it's a completely different project. So just some more information on costs and utility capability, capacity, I think is important.
Any last comments from the group before we go to public comment on this item? Any public comment on this item? Okay, so no public comment other than appreciation on this item. Any last words? Yeah, Mitch.
Just, this is pretty self-contained to talking about EVs, but on the subject of planning for the future, making our system more resilient, and not just mandating where stuff is now, but looking at where the infrastructure could be. Something else we can look at, especially for parking areas, is potential for solar panel installation in the future. For example, at the city wastewater treatment plant, it was found that certain structures couldn't sustain the panels that we got grant funding to put on them. But as we are redoing stuff, we can build that to a higher standard. Also, for the Farmers Market Pavilion in parking lot B, that is being built. It doesn't have panels on the roof right now, but it is structurally engineered and wired in a way that it could support panels in the future. And yes, solar panels are also something that has evolved over time. And it's not like the panels on top of a parking lot would be able to supply a fast charger and then you could just go right away. But it is something that can help the overall process of electrification.
Makes sense, thank you. Okay. Sounds like you've got a lot for that item. Do you need anything else from us?
That's plenty.
Okay. Should have stopped us a while ago, maybe. Okay, we're gonna move on to C, but I do have to use the restroom, so I think we should take like a 5-minute break, because I think these next 2 items will be another big item, little item pair-up situation. So we'll be back shortly. Maybe it'll be less than 5. Middle of your conversation.
I'll watch any of it.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
long, but it was one of the single greatest films.
Oh, no,
I've
that
seen
was
in
not
many
one.
years.
Yeah.
To maybe pushed it.
We'll go see it when it's.
Well, it's just because this,
I'm reading,
though.
I do not. As somebody that like tries to get it all in before.
I read that
now,
one. God, it was
So
so
that I
good.
have
It's very
nothing before I go to
I know the story in the footnotes. I love a good
Yeah.
weird format.
I got it.
I know.
Because when Chelsea gave it to me, she like,
Okay.
stories in the
Yeah.
footnotes and stuff, and I was like,
I just was.
what's going on here?
I
I know.
just
And
was-
you kind of
I
realize
started
what's
going
going
over
on
here.
pretty early.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it's very interesting.
I just don't, I can't believe that same guy wrote Life of Pi.
Very different book, yeah. Very different book.
It's like amazing. But he basically wrote a fake epic poem.
Okay, looks like we are all back, so we can return right into item C, ADU regulation updates discussion. Back to you, Leslie.
So, if you recall, our goals, based on the action plan in the master plan, include to look at updating the ADU standards. In light of recent changes in the zoning ordinance that increase the viability of people putting in a second unit, not necessarily an ADU, but a second unit as allowed under zoning. The difference between an ADU and a second unit start to blur, and it's become more apparent to us that, is there a reason for this distinction? Do we need to still have two different categories? And if we forego one of them, do we make a change to the remaining other option? So the way I look at it is to, I kind of broke it down into three different options. One is just to simply remove the ADU option in the R1 districts. So people can, because I have to tell you that most people who come in and say, I want an ADU, that talk to the zoning administrator, he'll say, let's sit down for a minute. Do you really want an ADU? Here are the two options. And most of them, their situation, it does work better for them to do the second unit option. So we're seeing fewer ADUs and more second units. So, but, if we simply just wholesale remove ADU, keep the second unit option, it still doesn't work for every single lot that's R1 because you need a minimum of either 8,000 square feet or 14,000 square feet. depending on which district you're in, to have that second unit. So not every unit, not every lot meets that. And then also, this is the bigger thing, you're subject to deeper setbacks, primarily the rear setback, in conjunction with that second unit. So for some people, that still doesn't work for them, and they still opt for the ADU. So the other option is to leave things as they are, but in the R1 district to lessen the restrictions for an ADU. So people still have one option versus the other, but there aren't so many restrictions on the ADU because it's not such, some of the unknowns when it first was developed have been found to be not as scary maybe as it initially seemed to be, and they've become more accepted. So there are some restrictions like the location of the entrance for the ADU can be restrictive for some people. There's a restriction on where that can be. There's a requirement that the look or the character of the building match the primary building. And especially if we institute pattern book ADU options, it's going to be very unlikely that the architecture is going to match in all cases. There's a size restriction on 800 square feet. The zoning administrator recommends that we potentially look at just a percentage of the primary unit as opposed to the strict 800 square feet. And then lastly, there is an annual registration associated with an ADU that's required. And, part of that registration, it's my impression, is just to determine whether or not the owner of the unit or the owner of the property lives in one or the other unit. And so, it's just extra paperwork on both ends. And there have been cases where the owner had every intent of living in one unit and then renting out another, and then situations changed for them, and they couldn't do that, and they either had to sell their unit or move somewhere else or whatever, and their only option then was to do something more drastic, like take out a kitchen or something, so that ADU is just bonus space but not a separate unit, which is a little bit counterproductive. And I'm not going to say anyone does this, but it's been my experience in the past that when you do inspect someone who has taken out a kitchen, lo and behold, a couple years later, the kitchen migrates back again when you see the listing. So that's not a fail-safe thing, and it just seems like some unnecessary paperwork. So that's a whole area of another option. And then the third option is to kind of combine these two things, that, we take the best of both and combine them, maybe relax the setback standards for the second unit, have a size restriction on them, but not necessarily require that there are height restrictions for the ADU right now in relation to the primary building. Take away some of those things that could trip up somebody, but have some minimum standards in there, and just kind of, again, meld the two together and make it something new. So that's a lot of information and a lot to say. We could change everything or nothing. And so I guess I'm just looking for a little bit more thinking from the Planning Commission before we go ahead and start drafting something.
Thank you. Okay, there are going to be so many thoughts on this, especially from Shay and myself, who have real-world experience actively happening. So let's go Jerry, then Shay.
Yeah, mine's pretty simple. Or just my thought is, I've just heard from at least two different people that have so their situation was they got the ADU permit, they built the ADU, then so they have to pay the annual registration, but now they don't use it for ADU anymore, but they still have to pay. because it doesn't allow you to like if it's like a forever thing,
Unless you remove the kitchen or something.
which, yeah, right. So I just think that's something that,
What is the use case then if they don't use it as an ADU? They're using it as bonus space for that main property. Okay.
yeah, it just seemed like that we didn't, I don't know how many this would impact, but it was interesting, like they were stuck in this, like, so I have to pay this
Yeah.
$100 every year for paternity. Their circumstance changed, but anyway, I think it's $100, so I don't know what we really get out of that.
Okay.
Yes, as someone who has navigated this process recently, I went into it thinking that I was building an ADU. Turns out I'm building a secondary primary dwelling, whatever they're called. And I tend to lean towards combining them. The setback from the alley is 25 feet, and it's not even the alley, it's from your rear property line. So you could probably add another 3 feet to that, so what is that, 28 feet? You gotta really like someone if you're gonna be building that close to to the primary dwelling unit. I like my parents, so, it's gonna work out. I think, I tend to lean towards combining ADU and second unit options, especially, if I think one of the things that people really enjoy about single-family housing is that they have backyards, and by requiring that 25-foot setback from the rear line, you're eliminating people's backyard, their private space. Some people don't want to mow the lawn, that giant lawn, and they would be willing to build something if they could still maintain a little bit of lawn. So that's kind of my perspective on things. Full disclosure, this will not benefit me in any way because I'm going with what we got. So.
My thoughts, and then we'll go to Brian. Similar situation. My brother is building a second unit. It is practically done. He's just waiting for occupancy. He started last September, and he is doing it himself, and it is nuts. But I applaud him. Biggest complaint was the rear alley setbacks. Again, he has a primary unit that he purchased. He's on a reasonably sized lot near Oakwood Cemetery. Oakwood? Yeah. So in that cute little neighborhood right off to the west. His unit is amazing, and because his primary unit was so tiny, it does look big. But he's able to have a garage, and he's able to have a nice little space, again, even with accommodating the giant setback. He can also, this was interesting to me, have his mail on that side. So as long as the carrier delivers to the alley for another address, you can then ask for that. I did not think that would be possible. I thought you had to have it on the street. So that opens up a couple different things for me, because if you look at the front setback, I don't know what they are off the top of my head, but I think it varies based on neighborhood and district. You could have wildly different looking street views from either the front street or the alley, just trying to visibly compare the setbacks on either side. What was my other complaint that he complained a little bit about side setbacks, but I think he worked with Dave on that, so that they've worked that out enough. But the rear setbacks were a pain point. He already has a renter in, so this is like the perfect example of what we're looking for. We're looking for that gentle infill where somebody has a ton of space. They have the capabilities, the financial abilities, the want, the drive to put a second unit, and he already timed it so that his long-term renter is in there, and he's gonna move in when he gets his occupancy, and he's currently living with my parents. So it does work out, and I really want this to become a thing, and I think combining is the way to go. And I do believe that the nature of some of our lots at this point probably accommodate second units more than they do accommodate the ADUs. Just for a little bit of background, I think the 800 square foot, I think I was around for that. And I believe it was because there are some monstrously sized ADUs in a couple of neighborhoods. If you drive through, you're like blown away at the size of those ADUs. So I kind of understand why that was there. I much more prefer a percentage. That makes more sense. But I wouldn't want it to be limiting at all of the second unit, because you could get stuck in a situation like my brother where it's just a little modular that was plopped on a piece of property, and he now wants to build and design his own thing. I wouldn't want that limiting people at all in that way. So if the percentage would limit that, I would opt for not having it.
I also, through this process, found that my parents we can't split the lot the short way. It would have to be split the long way. And nobody's ever really given me a good reason why we can't do that, other than it needs to have 35 feet of street frontage. But I think it would probably behoove us to maybe look at having the alley as frontage, offering that as an option. I don't know why that is, and nobody's ever been able to give me a good reason why.
So, I think what most people end up doing when they want separate ownership or ability to separately finance them is to create a condominium. So we don't have any minimum requirements for land associated with each unit. So your unit can be one of the buildings.
Yeah, I didn't want to go that route though, because site condo is a little more complicated, I think. And I think just purchasing the back half of their lot, and I'm very niche probably, but I think purchasing the back half of their lot, I think there's probably other people similar to my parents that are retirement age, and they're like, why do we have all of this space? I don't want to mow this. I don't want to maintain it anymore. We have good friends that we would like to live next door to. We have family that are struggling. Let's sell them the back half and they can do whatever they want with it. So, but we found out we couldn't do that. And then with the 25-foot setback, we couldn't do it anyway because we would be cutting into our house. So
Yeah.
it's not a thing, but just something that I think to think about going forward.
Is that a local thing?
So
Or is that like a state thing?
a condominium?
No, splitting it with
Well,
a street frontage.
I think from my own point of view, I think, the zoning reform that allowed the second unit on a standard, minimum size lot, meeting the minimum requirements is a generous option because it is so difficult to divide most lots and make them meet, the frontage requirements, the ratio of the width to the length, and it can make it kind of wonky. So I think it's kind of the concession in exchange for, it's like the option for people who have the square footage but don't have the configuration to do a split. So it's a concession to them to just build that second unit, and you still have the option in Michigan to create a condo, so you can each own it separately, but you don't, and you can assign, this is kind of getting in the weeds, but you can assign any portion of that yard to be a limited common element associated with only one of those units, or it can be a general common associated with both units. There's all kinds of ways to split it up to meet what you need it to be, and then, share parking areas as a general common, and assign responsibility for maintenance to different parts of it. So there's a lot of flexibility and a lot of ways that you can personalize it to do exactly what you want to do and take away future, confusion. Because, again, I think for most people it's going to be hard to find separate parking, then you're going to have utility easements that run through the property. Doing those divisions for most people just is untenable. So it's not surprising to me, but I think it would be hard to roll that into here and also, have an expectation that we're going to now be asking the city commission to consider having, one-halving the, the lot size in addition, because that's the only way we could achieve what you're asking for.
Mitch?
Yes. Commissioner O'Brien does aptly say that this is his scenario was a niche case, but I feel that a whole lot of scenarios under this category are niche cases. Yes, we have street grids, but the street grid in central neighborhood doesn't have the same block sizes as Borden neighborhood, doesn't have the same block sizes as Triangle or Traverse Heights. We have rough approximations in each of those for what a, quote, standard lot is, but you can have, on the same block, a single lot go from less than 30 feet wide to more than 60 feet wide. And that's not because one got divided into two and at some point in the past. Plus, you've got neighborhoods like the base of Old Mission where none of your parcels are nice, neat rectangles. So we do end up with a lot of unique scenarios also. There are possibly down to a couple blocks of what could be properly termed tract housing, where you do have a lot of houses in a row that are more or less the same, that thus you don't have to say the front setback is the average of the rest of the houses on the block because they're all in a line. We have, in both historic neighborhoods and more modern neighborhoods, houses that might have been built 40 years or more apart from each other in different architectural styles with different setbacks and configurations respectively. I think that there is some need for thus flexibility, and having two categories does help with that. What is the perfect scenario when you have so many special cases? It is very hard to say. I would love it if we could have more site condos, because that does provide a little more flexibility that you don't have with lot splits. But to my knowledge, there's only one case of a parcel that had a house, built a second house, and they were site condoed in Traverse City, and that is the house that Sam Lasuso lived in at 14th and Cass. Which, okay, it's a lovely job, but it points to both the difficulties of that as an ownership scheme, and then how do you finance it when banks are much more willing to say, hey, you're a single-family house on a single lot, or you're essentially building a duplex, so let's treat that as a duplex. Condos, yes, they can work, but it can be more difficult to put the financing together for that.
And
I
that's
wish it was more possible,
Yeah.
and I could buy an ADU in this town, but that is not what the current market is providing.
And I should clarify, that's what I ran into, like, a traditional mortgage was not, you can't traditionally mortgage something unless you own it. So like, my wife and I can't get a separate mortgage unless we own the property. Because what does the bank get if we don't own it and we go bunk on the mortgage, so.
So condoing it is one route to do
Yeah.
that.
I didn't want to do that, though.
Yeah, I get that. There's a lot of costs involved.
Yeah, yes.
Brian?
Okay, so when it comes to financing, ownership, the type of ownership doesn't matter. Lot splits can be done to finance the costs of anything like that. Lot split can be done with just hiring a surveyor. And you can usually get most of the other steps done through just the application process yourself and meeting any requirements the city may have. You want to create a site condo, or, that requires an attorney. And what they charge for that's gonna depend on the attorney, and how good it is gonna depend on the attorney and your stuff, so it's more expensive. But it can be done, but anything you do like that, when you already have existing utilities, trying to do those types of splits, all that stuff in the ground, that creates problems for any type of split. Because then you're gonna have easements. Easements are gonna have to be defined. Type of easement. Can you get that done with just a surveyor? Or do you need a lawyer to write the easement agreements? But my bottom line for this is, this whole discussion about doing this is one step too far from what we're talking about today. I think that it's something we can always address later. Can you create alley space? Does that work? I don't know. Does any of this stuff work? But we could spend 2 months just on that question, about splitting things. Can we consider alley access points? We've turned alleys into streets to get around that question. So I don't know. And we've called alleys that are not streets. Going back to the points here, which is what I started on, was the three. So I'm not in favor of any three of your options. But I like components of all three. Okay? I question for everyone right now as we enter into this, and despite the small turnout in the audience at this point, wasn't what was done in 2023 that created a lot of animosity in the community and even among members of this board? Wasn't that kind of, some people complained about literally just getting screamed at?
Yes,
Yeah.
we were mostly screamed at and conceded owner occupancy for ADUs.
Yeah.
That's why it stayed.
Oh, I remember the ADU stuff. That's a whole nother battle. That was before us. But ADU's been around for a long time, and nobody really talks about them anymore. It's not an issue.
We tried to get rid of owner
But doing the
occupied.
second on pieces of property that were by size, met a qualification, but they had to be bigger than the minimum lot size, I think that made sense. I just don't know if 2026 is the year you want to tackle changing and expanding the whole two dwelling units in the R1 districts. In other words,
Yes.
getting rid of setbacks and all of that. I understand but at the same time, a 4-foot setback for an ADU and the 25-foot setback for a second dwelling unit, we can easily change that. That's, you just reduce that or change it. 4 feet works for me, I don't care. I don't even know why we have a 25-foot setback, but it's pretty common in all zoning, 25-foot rear setbacks. Is it so people but you can put a garage back there, right? But the main unit, it's because we require people to have backyards, and you must mow them. Oh, no. We don't require you to mow it.
Nope.
We just require you to have a backyard.
You'll get a warning if you don't mow, but that's it.
No, you don't get that.
Sometimes you do. You
Only
should.
if your neighbors complain.
Yeah,
Only if your
correct.
neighbors complain, and only because they think you don't know that.
Yep.
There's nothing the city can do about it. The ADU restrictions, I have a question. What is our requirement for location of entrances to ADUs?
Let me look it up.
I thought they just had to have a separate exterior entrance.
I think it restricts which side it's on, but let me look.
That feels weird.
Yeah, if we restrict which side or where it goes, then that's got to go. I don't know what the issue is with the structure's exterior appearing to be single-family. Do they make them look like office buildings, Quonset huts? I don't know what, clearly incidental to the principal dwelling unit. I don't know what the definition for that is, so I don't know what clearly incidental means. But it's a second dwelling unit, I don't know if it's incidental or not. That does me think. I think we can eliminate the annual registration I'm open on the other one about eliminating the owner occupancy requirement. You know, at this point, if a landlord can build 2 houses, why can't they build a house in an ADU and use them? The biggest concern, I remember one of the biggest concerns about that, and probably remains this day, is use of ADUs as short-term rentals, okay? The city's efforts to combat short-term rentals when this came was basically, you can't do that. It was sort of, they're much more, it's still a very difficult lift to enforce, but they're much more, you're much more effective. You're basically paying someone to enforce it. So I don't hear that complaint as often as I used to. But, I don't know, I hear it all the time, but no one can point to an actual person. So, and I don't know what your, I mean, it still occurs, I know. You guys still get a number of complaints, and I'm sure it still happens, but I don't think it's that big an issue. That's kind of where I would be at. I'm not sure I want to, you know, reduce some of the setbacks for a second unit. It made sense to me when you guys did it. I shouldn't say you guys, when we did it, that the setbacks were the same for a house and that the size of the lot had to be larger than the minimum lot requirement, which just seemed like, well, then why not, was my response. I know not everyone felt that way. But my response was, why not? I don't know if you want to start playing with that now. And I'm not saying we can't play with it in the future, but I'm more of a one step at a time. Let's see how things go. But yeah, half the restrictions in ADUs. You didn't mention the cap on ADUs.
We got rid of that, didn't we?
Right, there's no cap
Did we?
anymore.
My only question about
that here for that?
Didn't change behavior.
No, I know, it's never
this,
mentioned.
no, I think this was in the round in 2023. Were you
Oh,
here for that? I don't think you were here
No, I
for
wasn't
that.
here for that.
Yeah, so it was during that period. I have a vague recollection of getting into a tiff in 2023, not tiff, getting into an argument about length of stays. Is there a definition of a length of stay for an ADU? Or were we getting into the definition of a length of stay for a tourist home and I'm conflating those?
No, it was for ADUs.
There
It was
is one for ADU.
Yeah.
Okay.
90 days for that, but we didn't have any length of stay aside from it has to be longer than a month for other classifications.
Okay.
Because in the state legal definitions, less than a month is short-term, more than a month is long-term.
And that was again to try to combat what we suspected was happening was short-term renting those?
Yes.
Because we don't have that in a second unit. So,
I don't
Yeah.
know if we ever had 90-day, do we have 90-day requirements in ADUs?
We
For an
did.
ADU.
Do we still have it? or
I
was it-
think we do. I
Yeah.
think they kept that in 2023,
It's
and I
still there.
Well, you
didn't
should
want that.
definitely get rid of that.
Yeah, okay. That was one that I thought was missing from this list and,
Okay.
and
Shouldn't
wanted to look
treat
up.
A rental unit, because it's an ADU, different than any other rental.
Correct, especially if we have a second unit, and it's also gonna try to be a long-term unit because we don't allow short-term rentals in residential. It becomes moot.
Right, that's
Michelle?
redundant. I just had a question. So the one, well, it's a question and then a comment. The question is what problem are we solving for if we have 2 options? Kind of what Brian was saying, like, do we need to collapse these into one? Especially if we can change certain things that we've found to be pain points, with existing regulations, setbacks, things like that. But secondly, the other thing that kind of looking at lessen the restrictions of the ADU option, remove the 800 square foot size restriction on an ADU, instead limiting the size to a percentage of the primary dwelling. We have some pretty small houses. And a percentage of those, like, is the 800 square foot, if it's a garage and a dwelling unit, is it those combined?
No,
So it could be,
Footprint.
it's just,
It-
well,
it's the
it
footprint?
depends.
or is it,
It's a total floor area,
so it would be 400 and 400,
right,
as opposed to, so,
No, but
And-
the garage is not
but,
part of an ADU.
but not
Yep.
garage.
Not the garage.
The
oh,
garage is
oh,
not-
okay,
Yeah.
Does
okay,
not count.
okay, that's fine.
It's gotta be livable space.
But thinking about, just thinking about limiting the size to a percentage of the primary dwelling, like 800 square feet is pretty small. The house I live in is, I think they want to say it's 1,200 square feet. It's not. It's like maybe 1,100, and it's pretty small. So like a percentage of that, if you thought about like, I don't know, 60% of that, it's going to be less than 800. So I guess I would, I don't know, 800 square feet. And I'm thinking about this definitely from my own perspective. We live in a pretty small lot, pretty small house, and facing that generation of it's time to live with family. You know, generations of families in the past have lived together, and what if we need to move a parent here? You know, I'm not thinking about it as an income property, but like 800 square feet, if it's my husband and I having to move in, I like him, but 600 is a little too small. So that was the only concern I had. I kind of like Brian's suggestion, really, of like, there might be some things that we could tackle. That 25-foot setback is ridiculous. I mean, I don't think my front setback is that big.
That's what I'm saying.
Right,
yeah.
10 feet
Yeah,
from
I
the
did,
sidewalk?
I did a Google search and it was standard is 10 to 20 feet
For a rear?
for rear setbacks.
For a rear setback. And
Specifically, yeah.
also, like, why would we do 25-foot setback on what is fed by an alley as
Yeah.
well? You're just creating
Yeah.
dead space.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know about you. I'm not gonna really hang out on the alley in my front yard.
Yeah.
No, you're then forced, if somebody wants to drive by my brother's, you're then forced to make a fake front yard.
Yeah.
Now he has like a little porch.
Yeah.
And he has a little fake tiny front yard.
Yeah.
That he threw grass seed on because it looks silly if you don't have that.
Right, then you're just creating parking
dead space,
spaces,
yeah.
quite frankly, which I would rather have a unit right up against the alley. And anyway, so that was just my thought. Like, I don't know, are we fixing something that's not broken? What is the problem we're solving for here? Are there just ways to go about it and reducing some of those restrictions?
I think the problem though is like as a user, it is confusing. Like like I said, I went in thinking I'm building an ADU, turns out I'm building a secondary dwelling.
So we're keeping the zoning administrator.
Yeah, but I think
Employee.
streamlining it is a good idea. Like streamlining it for user purposes, like simplifying it is a positive in the long run.
Ish, unless it restricts. I mean,
True,
what we
yeah.
want is gentle infill,
Yeah.
and right now we have two options for it. If we did some of these things, thinking about my property in specific and my neighbors, it might actually
True. Good point, yeah.
restrict.
My one thought would be, as to the why, maybe Jackie and Mitch can give us a little more context, because I think this came from the city commission. So having a little more context on why they asked us to look at this and review this would be helpful. So if this is the moment, let's do that and then go back, because I know there are more comments. So Jackie, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, on July the 6th, the City Commission endorsed adoption of the Attainable Housing Tool, which is something that is fairly new to the state of Michigan and hasn't been used in a lot of communities. But essentially, it's taking the concept of a pilot, so tax breaks for a certain number of years, and it's a peculiar form of tax break related to not uncapping the value of your primary residence, but it essentially allows a second dwelling with a tax break for 12 years, and it is intended specifically for small-scale landlords, so a maximum of 4 units. And it was seen as a good complement to our adoption of various pilot agreements for multifamily developments. And so the action of the City Commission last night was to request that the Planning Commission see what our current ADU requirements are specifically and see if they are supportive and moving in this same direction, along with pre-approved plans for ADUs, or I suppose second dwellings could become the definition, but asking for a recommendation from us by the end of the year as to what could we do as a body to support this new attainable housing tool that the city would like to make available. And it was interesting, one of the public commenters last night was actually the attorney for Frankfurt, and they have implemented the attainable housing tool. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mitch, but I remember him saying something about having a pre-approved plan could represent a savings to the small landlord or homeowner of $30,000 to $40,000 in terms of plans
But it
and
does,
permitting.
yeah,
and
it can. It depends a lot about your specific environment and
Yes.
how streamlined the permitting process already is.
Yes. So this is a new tool to support gentle or quiet infill, and I think that one of the most important things is ensuring that we can find a way to build more, build faster, but also build affordable. And I hope in our conversations that we can be focused on units that, whether they are for rent or for sale, can fill some of that missing middle, not only from the perspective of the person who's living there, but also the perspective of the owner. We're looking to help the little guy and do it in a way that is supportive to the people who are in the neighborhoods now and preserves both quality of life and affordability. What
Thank
did
you.
I leave out, Mitch?
Oh, you covered a lot of the main bases for where we're coming for this, but it is also something that's in the strategic plan. It's in the master plan, as this is something that meets our goals of providing more housing while protecting neighborhood character. But it's also on the goals for this body as something that we can achieve. And what that actually looks like in terms of deciding what our ADU second home regulations are, and we don't know. That we'll have to go through this process. We've asked a number of questions already.
Michelle?
I just would, as we move forward on this, knowing that background, it would be interesting to me to see what barriers exist to utilizing that tool with what we currently have and see a kind of a breakdown of that. Or if what we have is actually perfectly set up for the tool. I don't know anything about it, so more background on that would help me think about, how we can move forward. Also sounds like that's something, might be a tool where we could build units that could be for sale and not just for rent, or, so just that would be my question.
Yeah.
As we move forward.
And this may be way off base, but, it made me think about our cottage court option. Is our cottage courts something that, sort of fit into this niche and we should be finding ways to incentivize? I don't know, but it seems to me that smaller, more affordable units, because those usually go hand in hand with pre-approved plans that can reduce the barriers to building and to increasing our housing stock, are all good things. So in terms of what are we trying to accomplish, if I was trying to summarize it, I would point us in that direction.
Thank you. Mitch?
Yes. As I said before, I do support keeping both things. The fact that in a lot of cases, it could be an ADU or it could be a second home doesn't or ignores the fact that there are lots that aren't large enough for a second home but are large enough to have an ADU, or cases where the lot theoretically might be large enough to have a second home, but the existing primary dwelling is positioned oddly or is of such a size that you couldn't really do that, but you can still put an ADU. And for the size, I think that it makes a lot of sense having 800 square feet as a maximum, because we do have a very wide range of housing sizes of the existing primary dwelling, and you could have, if it was saying you have to build it no more than 60% the size of the primary residence, we have some very large primary residents that could have, in effect, a very large house that is legally an ADU. But in Traverse Heights, we've got houses that are under 800 square feet. So many of those lots are fortunately large enough that you can put a second house on. And I do appreciate that flexibility, though I can see a scenario where somebody has a 720 square foot house with an attached garage that then they try to say, hey, I'm going to call my existing house the ADU and then build a second house that's much larger. And does that meet our criteria? Hard to say, but I can't see that as being an actual problem if we're trying to just create more variety and the lot is large enough.
Brian?
Yeah, I'd agree with Mitch. I don't think that's an issue. I don't think you can not, I don't think if you build a second structure and one is the ADU, you can declare, you have to live on one of the properties. I don't know which one. Maybe that is an issue. If that's an issue, then we have to change those regulations, because I know people who want to build an ADU that they're gonna live in and rent out their house.
For some people, it makes more sense to do it that way
Yeah,
too,
if
actually,
you're
financially.
getting older and you have a multi-story house,
Yeah.
you build a one-story ADU, and then you rent out the rest of the house. So if we can't do that, we need to address that. I think that, and I have a question. So in the past, when the ADU was first adopted, I was here then. It did not have to be a separate unit. It could be part of the building. Do we still allow that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we eliminate ADUs, we eliminate that. But what happens if we have a house that's 3,200 square feet and they want to break off half of it, or that you find a logical space to make that break to build your one wall? And we say, no, that's too large, that's 1,200 square feet. So instead, you got to go do this and that and the other thing to
Well, then
make
it's a
it work.
duplex.
To turn it into a second
So
unit?
then is it a duplex? Does it matter? Does anybody even do that for ADUs anymore? I don't know.
Yeah.
But I don't have a problem having other options for people. I think the 800 square feet could be a minimum, not a minimum. You can build anything up to 800 square feet. If you want larger, then you could add a percentage to it. So it could be, so if your building is 800, if your building is 800 square feet and our percentage, or is 700 square feet, and you want to build a 1,200 square foot structure, instead of playing around, and that's your ADU. The reason I say this is because size of a structure, cost to build that structure, and the amount of money you can bring in renting that structure are all tied to each other. And the cost to build an 800-foot structure, to build a 1,000-foot structure compared to an 800-foot structure per square foot, there's not a big difference, okay? But the smaller units, you pay all those extra mobilization costs, all those same contractors, they all charge you just to show up, okay? And it's like there's all sorts of those set costs that you're paying. And hence you pay a ton of money for that 800 square feet. That means you got to rent it for more money. Whereas you could build 1,000 square feet and maybe, so you add an extra bedroom there, so you house more people, can house more people in it, and it makes more sense. So I think the 800-foot, you could have it down there as a minimum, maximum. So you could always build 800 square feet, no matter what, or a percentage of your building. Then if you want to run into another problem, if that's a concern. But really, you need to look at all the setbacks. If you eliminate the cap altogether, you got to look at all the setbacks and what that might mean, and the lot coverage restrictions. Those are the things I'd want to look at going forward. That's it.
Jackie, then I'm going to go to Leslie, just so
Okay.
everyone knows.
Just a few more comments in terms of size. Certainly from the construction perspective, I'm sure you're right. I'd also like to add in considerations like tree canopies and impervious surface coverage and household sizes declining. And, let's be sure that we're baking in as much flexibility here and with our focus on attainable, affordable, missing middle sorts of housing, which we just haven't been very successful at incentivizing yet. So that's it.
Jerry, then I'll go to Leslie.
Yeah, the only thing I'd like to, so the pattern book, and this is, maybe Brian remembers this, but I know in Morgan Farms, which was a PUD, there was a pattern book for that development. I remember that causing later down the road issues, because then when things were developed, there was this pattern book that kept being referenced, and the design didn't meet it, and there was all, so I just want to make sure, what are the limitations of a pattern book? Like, what if someone doesn't want to use the pattern book and they want to use their own design, is that allowed? Because I do think that would be allowed.
Most cities, that's how they do pattern book. It's an option. It reduces the costs up front
For some.
for some that want to use it, but then other people can use their own design.
And that's where I just recall from, I think, again, it was PUD, so maybe they made it different
Yes.
for Morgan Farms. But I remember the pattern book was became this point of contention 15 years later, because the pattern book was approved and then they were veering from it, so.
There was also a change of hands,
Yes.
which adds to it.
Those are different pattern books, I think.
Yeah.
So a pattern book from Morgan Farms was about how the whole subdivision was supposed to look, how each section was supposed to look, and how it's supposed to be designed. The types of buildings, how the size of the buildings. It was literally a site plan, okay? And then it had images which showed the pattern, the type of buildings. So, and to change that was a major change. These, I think, we're talking simply about putting together, I'm assuming the city would do this, would pay for architects and builders and engineers to put together a number of different house patterns. In other words, builders' drawings that could be easily adapted to a standard city lot. If we actually have any of those, I don't think we do. But if we did, you could easily adopt them. So you could go in, you could pick one of these. You would not have to hire a designer to do any of that work. You don't have to do any engineering. And the
Architect.
permitting, nobody hires architects anymore. I mean, they still do.
They know
Some people
somebody.
do. Certain people, they're not going to be, the people who are architects are not going to be using pattern books, okay? Everyone else basically hires someone who can do drawings. And then you come in and then the city would reduce its permitting requirements because the review has already been done. So you could reduce some of the permits. City doesn't-
Time.
Yeah.
Save time.
And you would have the building code, construction codes for the county would also have to buy into this because they would be the same way. They would just basically look at, you submit that pattern and they have it and they approve it. It's a pre-approved pattern. As soon as you want to make a change, that all goes out the window.
Yeah. Mitch?
Yeah, and
Oh, I'm sorry. After Mitch, we are going to Leslie.
Leslie can go next.
I just wanted to check in with you because
Yeah.
this is a lot. I feel like somebody's gonna have to re-listen to hear all the things that we have liked and disliked. And I'm sorry about that.
No, I
So-
think, I did want to kind of summarize. I think what I'm hearing is that it makes most sense to keep both options and remove a lot of those restrictions for sure from ADUs, the ones we talked about, plus the term of rental, you know, the
Yeah.
90-day
Yeah.
thing. And by the way, that restriction on the location of the entrance, now I just lost it again. Where'd that go? It's, oh, shoot. Okay. Only one entrance may be located on the facade of the primary building facing the street. So I think the idea there was that they didn't want it to look like a duplex.
Yeah.
And they wanted this to be as innocuous and unnoticeable as possible. So I think a lot of the standards in here that were the concession to doing that don't make as much sense anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of them.
Since we allow duplexes by right now,
Yeah,
yeah, getting
No.
rid of that would
Yeah.
totally.
make sense.
But I could be totally wrong, but I thought we only allow duplex. Oh, no, we do allow duplexes. Okay, I take that back.
Mitch,
Yeah, back on pattern book homes, in the places where this has been done, Muskegon area is some good examples in the city of Roosevelt Park, which is one of the suburbs immediately to south, has entire streets where it was, and you can look, and each house looks different, but then you look at the architectural elements and realize there are only 3 or 4 houses, and it was just cut and paste different elements. So that does help, and in some of their infill and redevelopment of brownfield sites, the city of Muskegon has made pattern books homes available. But it works best if there is not just one house here, one house there, whatever. If there's going to be a number of houses that are filling these same patterns, and thus one or more contractors can say, hey, we've built literally this house or this ADU before. Here's our materials list. Here's our crew spreadsheets. We can just cut and paste down the line. And what that could mean here is, say, if a developer like Sox, which has already proven with its Front Street development that they can do off-site modular construction and then build on a short timeline, something like that could end up being an option for ADUs or second homes. I don't know if it would be like Sox on Front Street, where it does come in prefab sections, but hey, if there is enough interest in the community, that is something that would dramatically reduce the price per square foot to actually do the construction.
yeah, Jackie?
Just a thought that if we could sooner rather than later bring into the conversation our parking department as well as our mobility services, just because, you know, quiet infill, one of the things that it puts pressure on is on-street parking, and to understand if there are options that those folks see that might be enabling, and again, to make the increased density more palatable to the existing residents. I'd like to hear from them too about any ideas they could toss in.
Brian?
Just to say, I think pattern books for ADUs or second homes makes a lot of sense. You know, but that's really a city commission financing question. If they want to pay for that, I don't know what it costs. And then they got to reach out to the county and see if they're into it. But I don't know if it makes sense for primary homes in the city. We don't build that many new primary homes.
Yeah.
I know, we don't have that much space, so.
Yeah, and it also really helps if you have lot sizes and configurations that are consistent across the whole
Accommodate
city,
it.
which we don't have to the same extent as other
Yeah.
communities.
Yeah, my only fear with that would be, is there a way without making it super costly to the city to have a couple options that you can then configure because we have so many different, like, differing lot sizes and I also don't want to see a bunch that pop up looking exactly the same. So I'd want some variety. But again, not like chicken or the egg. Like it would be expensive, but it helps. And so that's just kind of my thought on that, on pattern books.
It's, you know, it's expensive to you and I.
Yeah.
To the city, it's chump change.
Yeah.
They spend millions on all sorts of things.
I have so much
that
information
some of us
to share with
question.
you.
Okay,
So-
Leslie.
But I guess I'll just start with saying that actually for, you know, a couple of years in our office, we've been talking about pre-approved plans, and we've been talking to some companies. One in particular, just a couple days ago, sent us, we got back in touch with them, sent us a proposal for what a program might look like. They offer lots of different options, and the program that they threw out there for consideration would provide, you know, some upfront engagement with the community, you know, specific designs to fit our specific issues, and, you know, a slew of several different options that become available and that are specifically designed for us. And I guess I can tell you that option was somewhere around $50,000. There are other options that,
Yeah.
and you know, you can scale it up, you can scale it down, you can take out the public engagement part, you can
Yeah.
have fewer home options. There are also options where you can take pre-approved, you know, they've already designed some things, and you can get a subscription to those, or you can have them design something and then buy a subscription for those. So every year you pay, it's something on the order of $1,000 per plan option that you have a subscription to. So maybe in the future we could shift
Add
them
more
out,
if we need, yeah.
add
Mhm.
some, take some out, design new ones to fit what we need. So some of the information we got from them, some of their general recommendations are that it works best when you can stack incentives, like the attainable housing option, certainly waiving permit fees, working with construction code to waive those fees, hookups for utilities, all of those things, so that it can be as ready to go as possible. You know, another recommendation or another notion that they have is that there still are going to be the realities of our market, and you know, it's not necessarily affordable housing. It's a quicker infill housing option that might save a little bit of money for people, but it's not going to solve all of our housing problems. It's not necessarily going to be affordable, but it can become more affordable if we stack it with other incentives. And so we should be, you know, keeping our eyes open and seeking out other ways that we can, again, stack it so that we can make this a package that people really want to take advantage of. And just a little aside, yeah, the pattern book thing versus kit homes versus pre-approved plans are all used interchangeably. For instance, the Commons used to have a pattern book that was their zoning that was this thick, and according to Restoring, they had to call in a particular architect to interpret it and to decide whether any new addition of a building or tiny change met the code or not, because it was so
Yeah.
dense and so detailed. And those are usually much more architecturally based, and they're often part of like a form-based code. So I personally don't like using the word pattern book because it kind of brings that to mind, and that was kind of a product of the 90s that has kind of gone by the wayside. And not used as much anymore. But it is usually like one developer, one big development, and then that's their pattern book, and that's their pick and choose modeling, you know. But then also, if you look around the city, you see all kinds of twin houses.
Yes.
So we do have a history of, kind of a pattern book, and we have lots and lots of kit homes, and I happen to live in a kit home. And a lot of them are, they're hard to recognize if you don't know what the kit homes are, because they're not necessarily, most of them are not Sears kit homes in this area, and most of them don't look like what you expect them to look like. So I love the idea of that, and they're starting to come back a little bit. There are kit home options today. And we certainly have been talking to organizations like Housing North about options for pre-approved modular, homes, and how those can be those second units, how we can make that more of a replicable model for people. But again, there's so many different situations, lot to lot, and lots of times access and like craning in a building can get difficult or impossible. So a lot of things that sound great don't necessarily pencil out for us. So it will be really interesting if we're able to work with somebody like, this is called Pattern Zones, I think is the company. They've also done work in Michigan and for MML, which is, how we kind of got on our radar. But it would be interesting to work with them and see what they see as the things that I think are insurmountable to try to create standardized, pre-approved plans that they may say, don't worry about that, that's workable. It'll be nice to get someone to give us that kind of input and see what they can come up with for us. So I'm looking forward to that, and I think we're kind of ready to roll on that as well. And there are other companies that offer similar services, so.
Cool. That's awesome. Anything else from this group? Did I already jump to public comment? I did not do public comment yet. Let's do public comment. Okay. Closing public comment, coming back. Any last comments we want to get in? So obviously we'll see this again. It's going to come back with a lot of notes.
Are we allowed to make motions at special meetings?
Yes.
Yes.
That's a meeting, though, study session.
Okay, just for future reference.
For future reference, you can. When it's a special meeting, which we are having tonight.
Which I want to say to Brian, I made a special meeting thinking that we had something to take action on, but it actually is just a study session. So I want to be honest with you.
I wasn't going to say anything. I was okay.
I mean, I could make a motion.
Okay.
Okay. Seeing nothing else, I think we've extensively talked about this. I think they have lots of notes. They'll come back with us with some, proposals. So we're going to move on to our last item, D, proposed childcare zoning amendments. I hope this one was also interesting to everybody. I guess I'm throwing to Leslie.
Yeah, so this is another one of those things that's really become more and more apparent that childcare options are a huge issue to not just Traverse City and our region and our state, but it's a commonly heard issue, not just cost, but availability of childcare. And just as a side note, we did do a resiliency, I want to call it a resiliency plan, but I'm going to call it a resiliency toolkit because that's what MEDC calls it. So it's something where they helped us to identify what our big, what the big issues were in our city that threaten our future resiliency, whether it is, climate-based, economy-based, things from outside, or housing-based, or, our workforce, things like that. So a lot of them were more broad and outside of zoning, outside of our boundaries. And one, we honed it down to, I think, 4 different topics, and one of them was childcare. So at that level, that was recognized. It's certainly recognized in our strategic plan. And we've been asked to take another look at childcare, also in light of the fact that there's some indication that there is a childcare organization, and by that I mean like a commercial center, childcare center, that wants to go in at property zoned OS, namely the Civic Center, and strictly speaking, it's not covered in the zoning ordinance. So similar to the farmers market change that we made recently, this seems like an oversight in a district that we should add child care centers into. And while we're at it, we took a broader look, and there are, I would say, 3 different kinds of, there's 3 categories of child care centers. 2 are the residential child care centers. They are defined under state law, and there's certain things that we can't do, we're a little restricted under state law. So there's the family daycare, family residential care daycares, and those are 6 kids and under. And then there's the group child care homes, and those are, again, a residential home caring for up to 12 kids, 7 to 12. So generally, in most municipalities, the small ones, and I think under the law, we can't restrict them in any residence. So if you have a residence, you can have the small one, the family, up to 6. And then if for a group one, it's often restricted to certain districts, and or they require a special land use permit, or there's other restrictions like spacing requirements between one child care center and the next. So that's what our ordinance looks like. It's a little sprinkling of the small ones are allowed everywhere, the larger ones are only allowed in certain districts, and or with all of those districts are a lot of restrictions. The law doesn't require that we have all of those restrictions. Don't forget, they still get licensed by the state, and that's quite a process. And the law also gives a lot of grace to incorporated cities and villages, and lets you basically that you know best, unlike townships where they kind of say you can do this, you cannot do that. They give us a lot of latitude. So in a city, we can forego all of those rules. We can restrict further where we allow the larger ones. So the recommendation here is just to make it equal. Every district where there's a house, you can have the small ones, no question there. The larger ones, we recommend that equally be allowed in any residential home, and that most of the rules go away other than requiring a permit for those. But the spacing standards, the requirement for having like a fenced-in playground, things like that, we're not going to be the playground under these, not be the playground police and not have all of those other restrictions. So that's my recommendation, that we just make these as easy to get local approval for as possible. The group childcare homes, they don't come along very often, and lots of times when they do, it's because the licensee wants to have maybe 7 or 8 kids because they're caring for a couple of families, and a lot of those kids are after school. So it's not as scary as it sounds. In most cases, it's not 12 infants or 12, it's not a mini school. It often is mostly after-school care and families with 2 or 3 or 4 kids. And then secondly, we're recommending that we expand the commercial child care centers to more districts, and making them all use by right, and also loosening up or eliminating the requirement that in some districts that they be associated only with a school or a church. So right now in all of our residential districts, if you want to have a child care center, it would have to be part of a school or a church. And, you know, in the end, I don't see a big difference between that because, you know, there's still going to be the same number of kids there, potentially. There's still going to be the same, you know, amount of traffic and noise and the expected impact of having a child care center. But to restrict it only to a church or a school seems a little bit too restrictive to me. Again, these are all based a little bit on just my past experience and also just seeing where we have these strange little pockets when we actually do this matrix. It seems a little antiquated. And then very lastly is that we call them child care organizations. And if you actually look at the state's definition, child care organization is the umbrella term for everything, including the residential. We're just using the wrong term. So we should call them child care centers and use the standard definition for a child care center. And those are the commercial ones that are not in home. So that's it.
Jerry?
Yeah, so as someone that has kids in all sorts of things, I've been in a child care center. I'm in a family child care home right now in Slabtown. I'm all for this because there's obviously a need. We're lucky that we got into all of this, and now I have a kid going to kindergarten, so I'm almost done with one of them. But anyway, so yes, I'm very in support of standardizing, making this a little more widespread, and cleaning this up, and that's also in the strategic plan.
Okay, I know Mitch had his hand up, and then we'll do Mitch Jackie.
Yeah, I generally support a little more streamlining and loosening up certain things like distance requirements. It's aside from one competing with another, it's not like it harms the community to have more places where kids are. At least I should hope not. In terms of where they're allowed, I am a little puzzled why both residential child care homes and group child care homes are allowed in our industrial district, but not in our hospital district. And it seems like those could be flipped. Not that employers in an industrial district don't have need for childcare, but it seems a poor sighting to, if you're having factories in our industrial park at Narrow Park, to have kids right next to noisy factories. But at a hospital, it seems fairly reasonable. I understand why associating group facilities with a school or a church makes sense, but I'm afraid that can set up scenarios where it ends up essentially being a tenant organization in a building that then the building ceases to be the school or church that it had been operating as. And okay, the church on Ramsdale is continuing to operate as a church, but somebody could move in and say, hey, this is an existing church building. We don't mind if a childcare group is there some of the time, but we are going to be using the building for some other use. And I think that we should have at least some flexibility or maybe a broadening of categories that can be qualifying spaces.
Jackie?
I was very puzzled to see that the church and school sponsorship requirement was there for childcare centers. So I think taking a look at that and the need for it is very appropriate. If that is eliminated, it seems to me that it opens the opportunity for commercial franchises of childcare centers. And that brings along with it issues of branding and signage and some of those things that within residential areas maybe are already perfectly well regulated, but I'd like to be sure that that's being evaluated. And in terms of childcare as a use by right within OS, I wanted to mention that as an add-on to the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, that there's the intention to create a full inventory of all of our park properties and specifically identifying zoning by the end of the year. So I think coming out of that inventory, we're going to see that we have a huge variety of sizes and shapes and flavors of OS zoned properties within the Parks and Rec, and that we maybe want to take a look at that range before putting together a blanket use by right. So it'll be another data point to come in by the end of the year.
Brian, I know you had your hand up. I'm going to speak real quick because I agree with getting rid of the recommended amendments 2, 3, and 4. The only one I worried about was, and then adding it as a use by right everywhere except OS. I feel like that was a little weird. I think what Jackie just brought up is fine. I guess my question about that was, because they require a facility, does the facility have to exist before the use by right, or no, because somebody could just purchase a portion of OS land if it goes up for sale and then just put it in. But there are so many different OS spaces, like that whole chunk of wetlands at the corner of 14th and Division.
And disposal of city parkland is really complicated.
Yeah.
And
So
highly litigious.
It just felt really weird, and in an attempt to try to move this without getting hung up on that, I just wanted to say 2, 3, 4, go, and then in terms of allowing it use by right everywhere but OS, because it just feels like that's more of a can of worms. Go ahead, Brian.
Okay. So I thought I read somewhere, but now I'm not seeing it or can't find it, that the family child care home by state law isn't subject to zoning, or is correct?
Right.
So we should just eliminate that from the ordinance, except as a definition that says not subject to zoning.
Well, I think the way it's usually done is just clearly say it's permitted by right in all residential districts, because
Okay.
that's what the law says.
Now, people need a site plan for that? Okay. You guys go do it your way. I think my way's easier, less confusion. We don't have a chart that shows something that says, people say, well, what is a, of course, you should really have little things like how many people or children can be in these, so, because the terms are so strange.
Vague.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with, for the group family homes, I don't have a problem with, I remember when we did this and allowing it residential, and there was a lot of pushback from the community. And I don't know if any or how many got established, but it's like, this was a compromise. So, and so I think people are used to it now. no one's concerned. I agree with what Mitch said earlier, it's not a big deal, so, boom. I don't understand the whole, the parking requirements, but if you're gonna require a site plan for it, you should designate a drop-off area. So, doesn't have to necessarily have to be on site, but you should, for safety, you should have a drop-off area required. I know that issue has come up in the past. I like changing the name to match the state, and the only other question I have is the definition, the new definition you have in here for childcare center. Is this the state's definition? Because I'm not a fan.
Yeah, there's a shorter one.
Yeah.
That removes a lot of this. And I almost changed it in the last minute, but yeah, it does not need to be this long. But also I thought, if you did want to look and see what a child care center under the law really is, it's this, if you want to read those. So there's a lot of things that
I
don't
would
fall
just
under that category.
Refer to the state.
Yeah.
And leave it at that.
Yeah, but there is a much shorter version we could use.
Because that's like tells us everything it's not.
Yeah.
So, and I was really, I don't have a problem with all the districts, including OS. Open space districts are all city or county owned or controlled properties. And if they want to do it, that's up to them, you know. And if they want to run something that want to build a facility in one of the parks that's up to them. They're gonna have to go through the public process, justify it, everything they want to do. And I know they're talking about it, but I just, I don't have a problem with it. I think their numbers are kind of off, but their proposal that I read about in the paper for the city is more expensive than just about everybody else who offers it. So, just so you know, hopefully that will get adjusted if you when you move those processes forward. But, and I was just want to know how far back the $600 for babysitting exceeds $600, where that number comes from. I mean, my sisters were exceeding $600 back when I was a kid, and that was a long time ago. So, but anyways, we're getting rid of that number anyway, so.
Yeah,
doesn't
you
matter,
know,
but it's-
I didn't even look at those definitions, but you're right, those aren't the standard ones either. I'll double check those. I think we could stand to standardize that and shorten them.
Yeah.
And
Well, that's the
for
city's current
600?
one. I'm assuming we're gonna
Right.
rewrite those.
Yep.
So, you know, how much babysitting money you can make.
I want my kids to go to where it's $600 a year.
Even for after-school care.
Yeah, like my kid gets paid way more than that in a week.
So, yeah.
Maxwell?
So, I'm fortunate to participate in the Northwest Regional Child Care Coalition through Networks Northwest. And some of the work that we're doing focuses on changes to zoning. So this is really encouraging to see Traverse City taking this step. Certainly not without precedent. Manistee has done similar changes to their zoning to be more childcare friendly. Some of the other work that the coalition is doing is pilot for wages for those in childcare education, early education, and seeing if there's an incentive structure that helps with recruitment and retention, because that's another element to the figuring out the child care issues that we're facing. I echo Brian's comments with respect to the definitions. I think it'd probably be easier and cleaner to reference the state definitions. And then also to point out that The group childcare homes, those could be done by right without a permit too, if that was something that you were interested in looking at. But generally speaking, I think this is a step in the right direction.
So, Brian, you have me partially convinced on the OS. But, so you're saying you're okay with if the city or county decides to sell off a chunk of that to then, and then somebody, the buyer decides they want to put in a facility? Because that could happen.
If the city or the county decide to sell off a chunk of that property, they're gonna apply to have it rezoned anyways. No one's gonna buy a park and put in a childcare facility. Doesn't make financial sense. So unless the city gives the property away.
Discount,
And
yeah.
I don't, and then sale of city parkland is subject to a referendum. So the county, who knows what the county's gonna do? The county's the county. Depends who's, sitting in those chairs. They've given away parks before, but not for conversion to commercial use. Doesn't happen very often. It does happen around the country, but up here, even for Grand Traverse County commissions, and we've had some previous commissions that were even way more conservative than our current ones, nobody was talking about selling parkland because they considered themselves conservatives, which meant
Keepers of.
conservation. So, in all things, so, yeah, I just don't see it happening.
Okay, I'm convinced. I'm fine with it.
Do we need a motion for this? I'm
There
seeing,
is
I'm
a-
reading in the recommendation.
Yeah, there's text for that at the bottom, but it sounds like we have consensus on
together.
quite a few
It says, motion
items.
instructing staff to prepare complete ordinance amendment language and further to set a public hearing.
I mean, if you want to make a motion.
Where
Is that
is
your
it? I
motion?
lost it.
Well, I think it's if we want to make a public, if we want to set it for a public hearing in August. Right? I don't think I want to set for a public hearing in August. That's in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I don't think, I'm sorry, that August meeting probably won't work.
It's too late to notice it anyway.
Yeah, so,
So the motion, it shouldn't have called out a motion.
Maybe not. We can prepare another version of this in light of what we've heard, and then, it's probably, if all these, if the stars align on all of these, having one public notice to cover all three of these text amendments is most efficient, so just save a little bit in publication costs.
I don't know if we want to have 3 public hearings on all 3 of these at the same time.
Okay,
If,
but
you know-
either way, I think we need more time, and
Yeah, I'm thinking bring it back in maybe in September for one of them and see where we're at.
okay.
Are we gonna have a second meeting in August?
I don't know. Sean will be back on Monday, so that's a question for him.
I think we have to go to
Okay.
public comment before we discuss anything
Oh,
else.
good call. Doug, would you like to make a comment on this item? Okay. Closing public comment. So now we're gonna, anything else from this group? Okay. Now I have to go back to my agenda because we have reports. I know we have a couple at least. Any reports from the city commission?
I think I've reported on the relevant things
Yeah.
as we went along.
The biggest thing is that the ADU discussion is happening at both levels, and we had a robust discussion about it right here tonight.
Okay, thank you very much. Planning department, I think you basically just gave an update.
Mhm.
Anything else?
I don't think so.
Stay tuned. You'll find out by the first meeting whether or not we're having the second meeting for sure. I'll know more next week, I'm hoping. Is that sufficient for the group? Okay. Update from Joint Commons Planning Commission. You go, Mitch.
Okay, well, we discussed a number of things, including the master plan process for that, which has been on hold, paused a little, but will be going forward. Discussed infrastructure and stormwater, how those are going. And then we did have quite a discussion about what can happen or what may happen in the future with roads, since Red Drive, which it had been a dirt road south of Greenspire, where part of the road is a parking lot, was recently closed by Garfield Township. You can still walk down it, but it's had a culvert fail, and they've decided that the township didn't want to spend whatever it would cost to bring it up to road standards, so it's closed. But then what does that mean for long-term planning, especially as was brought to our attention by a letter from the community? The master plan, originally back 16 years ago, that we are in the process of rewriting, recommends transferring all the private roads into a single ownership scheme, which would likely be the city as public roads. So what that would look like, it's hard to see, but there is a lot of problems caused by some roads being city roads, some roads being county road commission, some roads being township owned, but the Garfield Township doesn't build roads. And many roads, like Cottage View Drive, being private roads that are now split between multiple different condo associations and private property owners. So it is difficult then to maintain the roads and to have a coherent strategy for how do you not get 100 yards of the road replaced, but a whole stretch of a road replaced if and when it needs it.
It was a long conversation.
Yeah.
Update from Board of Zoning Appeals.
We haven't had a meeting. But in another township, Leland Township has some vacancies on their Board of Zoning Appeals, the appointments to which are contentious enough that it might lead to the recall of the township supervisor. So planning and zoning does matter.
Oh, I skipped it. I'll do it now. I'm so sorry. Thank you, Katie. Update on the Riparian Buffer Committee.
So, of course, the committee hasn't met again, but there have been a few things that have come up. This week, I'm meeting on site with Willow Creek Condominiums. That's at like Oak and Second-ish.
Third.
And they are very, they're concerned about the no-mow area, which is 10 feet, and their entire backyard is 10 feet. So, we just want to take another look at that and kind of do more ground truthing. Some other things have come up in regards to parking that I never would have thought about within the buffer area, relating to actually East Bay and some situations there. So I think we need to make some tweaks based on that. So, just people are knowing that this is out here, and as things come up or they have questions about it, I think we are kind of able to test it a little bit more. But then we also, there are components of it, if you recall, where we really could use some very specialized consultant input. And the city has approved a contract with GEI and others for the shoreline restoration project. And so we do have some direction from the city manager that we can fold them into reviewing this and providing a little bit more information, just to shore it up a little bit. See
Pun
what I did
intended.
there?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
And to provide some of the, appendix level information that isn't quite there. So give us a little time, but that's plugging along.
Thank you. Grand Traverse County.
I don't have a whole lot to update tonight. We have our housing study that's currently in process. Be happy to share more in the coming months once we have a report. And we're getting close to finalizing our plan for a community development initiative. So more to come on that in the coming months as well.
Thank you. Looks like we have a receive and file item from Acme Township. And now we're on to general public comment. Seeing none, I'm going to close public comment and appreciate everybody for making it through a 3-hour meeting. We're adjourned.
Yeah.
We had a lot of items, so.
Well, the
We
packet
cr-
tonight.